Most people recognize his name and know that he is famous for having said something. But considering the long-lasting impact his teachings have had on the world, very few people know who Confucius really was, what he really said, and why. Amid the chaos of 6th century BCE China, where warring states fought endlessly among themselves for supremacy, and rulers were frequently assassinated, sometimes by their own relatives, Confucius exemplified benevolence and integrity, and through his teaching became one of China's greatest philosophers. Born to a nobleman but raised in poverty from a very young age following the untimely death of his father, Confucius developed what would become a lifelong sympathy for the suffering of the common people. Barely supporting his mother and disabled brother as a herder, an account keeper at a granary, and with other odd jobs, it was only with the help of a wealthy friend that Confucius was able to study at the Royal Archives, where his worldview would be formed. Though the ancient texts there were regarded by some as irrelevant relics of the past, Confucius was inspired by them. Through study and reflection, Confucius came to believe that human character is formed in the family and by education in ritual, literature, and history. A person cultivated in this way works to help others, guiding them by moral inspiration rather than brute force. To put his philosophy into practice, Confucius became an advisor to the ruler of his home state of Lu. But after another state sent Lu's ruler a troupe of dancing girls as a present, and the ruler ignored his duties while enjoying the girls in private, Confucius resigned in disgust. He then spent the next few years traveling from state to state, trying to find a worthy ruler to serve, while holding fast to his principles. It wasn't easy. In accordance with his philosophy, and contrary to the practice of the time, Confucius dissuaded rulers from relying on harsh punishments and military power to govern their lands, because he believed that a good ruler inspires others to spontaneously follow him by virtue of his ethical charisma. Confucius also believed that because the love and respect we learn in the family are fundamental to all other virtues, personal duties to family sometimes supersede obligations to the state. So when one duke bragged that his subjects were so upright that a son testified against his own father when his father stole a sheep, Confucius informed the duke that genuinely upright fathers and sons protected one another. During his travels, Confucius almost starved. He was briefly imprisoned, and his life was threatened at several points. But he was not bitter. Confucius had faith that heaven had a plan for the world, and he taught that a virtuous person could always find joy in learning and music. Failing to find the ruler he sought, Confucius returned to Lu and became a teacher and philosopher so influential that he helped shape Chinese culture, and we recognize his name worldwide, even today. For the disciples of Confucius, he was the living embodiment of a sage who leads others through his virtue, and they recorded his sayings, which eventually were edited into a book we know in English as the Analects. Today, millions of people worldwide adhere to the principles of Confucianism, and though the precise meaning of his words has been debated for millennia, when asked to summarize his teachings in a single phrase, Confucius himself said, "Do not inflict upon others that which you yourself would not want." 2,500 years later, it's still sage advice.
Hi and welcome to our new series on Chinese historical figures. Today we're going to be starting off this first episode talking about Confucius. And if you're talking about notable figures in Chinese history, Confucius is a great place to start, because he really is the philosopher who defined Chinese society for the past 2,000 years. Now, Confucius is thought to have lived from 551 to 479 BC, during the so-called Spring and Autumn period, when China's Zhou dynasty was gradually splitting up. Now, this era later turned into the Warring States period before China was unified again in around 200 BC. Confucius was born in the state of Lu. This is in modern-day Shandong province. Now, at the time when Confucius was born, China was kind of like medieval Europe. Different states were competing with each other for power. Confucius saw morality deteriorating and the aristocracy turning their back on the traditions of the Zhou dynasty. Confucius viewed the Zhou as a kind of golden age. Confucius felt he had a mission to return China to its former glory, to return to the Way, or the Tao. Now today, the Tao refers to China's traditional culture of self-cultivation and emphasis on the way of virtue. Confucius felt that people in his age had lost true respect for the established rituals and norms of society. They merely carried out the formalities without really understanding the true essence. To use the words of the time, the world lacked the Tao. Thus Confucius started a mission of educating the populace. Confucius taught his disciples to become gentlemen, instructing them in the 6 arts: rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. Confucius stressed several philosophical concepts that would serve to maintain China's social structure for the next 2 millennia. These include benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness, as well as loyalty and filial piety, or the respectful relationship between subordinates and their superiors, such as sons and their fathers, or subjects and their rulers. Confucius was never employed in any significant government post during his lifetime. But during the Han Dynasty, almost 300 years after his death, Confucianism was adopted as the state philosophy. Confucianism came to be known as one of China's 3 belief systems, which also included Buddhism and Taoism. But Confucianism is very much a philosophy for those living in society, whereas Buddhism and Taoism stress withdrawing from the world to seek spiritual enlightenment. The Confucian belief that rulers needed to be virtuous led to the establishment of the imperial examination system. These examinations started in the Sui dynasty, which ran from 589 AD until 618 AD. The examinations saw officials selected based on their academic achievements rather than through a hereditary system, as was common in other parts of the world at the same time. Thus, scholars noted that for many centuries, China had the most advanced political system in the world. Gradually, these examinations became more structured through history. They saw prospective officials tested on their understanding and ability to memorize Confucian texts. Their answers during the exams had to demonstrate the well-cultivated thinking of a Confucian gentleman. The exam system ended a few years before the fall of Imperial China in 1911. After the communist takeover in 1949, Confucianism was ruthlessly attacked, especially during the Cultural Revolution and the campaign to smash the 4 olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. Since Confucianism had been at the very core of Chinese society for 2,000 years, the communist regime's attack against Confucianism can really be seen as an attack against the very essence of Chinese culture. But Confucianism has survived, particularly due to the preservation of the customs in Taiwan and by Chinese living overseas. Today, when speaking of traditional Chinese culture, Confucius can be seen as one of the most influential figures from ancient times right up until present day. His teachings are at the very heart of China's traditional culture of self-cultivation and emphasis on virtue.